I'm Bob McElligott, and I'm joined right now by ESPN's John Buccigross. And John, first of all, welcome back to Nationwide Arena. I know, being an Ohio guy, this is a place where you really feel like home.
Absolutely. Graduated from high school in Steubenville, college up in Tiffin, Ohio at Heidelberg University. So you're right. Whenever people ask me where I'm from, it's kind of a 60-second conversation because my parents are Boston people. I was actually born in Pittsburgh, but moved to Ohio when I was 11, and I've been in New England ever since I was 22. But this is the only place that feels like home, you know, that undeniable home feeling we all get wherever we're from. And it can be a different place for different reason for different people. But for me, this is when I feel my most home, that warm feeling inside. It's Ohio.
Well, I want to talk to you about the draft that you will be covering for ESPN. But first, I want to start with the Blue Jackets, who are about to kick off their 25th anniversary celebration. Yeah. Being an Ohio guy, do you remember 25 years ago when you found out that Columbus was getting a franchise and how you felt about Ohio joining the NHL?
Yeah, for sure. Again, my dad was born and raised in Boston, so he was born during the Depression, 1932, and the Bruins had a team for about 10 years. You know, they've had a team for over 100 years as Columbus is set to celebrate their 25th. And so he grew up with the game. You know, they won a Stanley Cup in 1939 when he was 7, 1941 when he was 9. So it must have made an impression on him at some point. He played high school hockey in Boston, goalie, no mask. So I was one of those few Ohio kids who certainly loved football and baseball and basketball, but because of my dad's upbringing, his passion for sports, and the fact the Boston Bruins were just this rock star team in the 70s, as I was an impressionable young kid at my dad's hip, watching him consume sports in a passionate, gregarious way, which then I would follow. The fact that he followed hockey like that, I grew up with the sport in a very natural way. I knew the flow, I knew the rules, I played. It was very natural for me. So yeah, and we started a street hockey league in Steubenville. We play on Saturday mornings during our high school, our years, and I'd write a newspaper and stats and everything. So you couldn't fathom a hockey team in hockey, really. It was so football centric, right? High school and college. You just couldn't imagine it. So when it finally, you got the announcement, and by that time I was at ESPN and an adult, and so viewing it from New England and Connecticut, where ESPN is, yeah, it was just, again, you couldn't fathom a hockey team was coming to Columbus.
And when you look over the last quarter century, college football is still obviously a beast here with Ohio State, but the Blue Jackets have found a niche in the market, and well, actually, I shouldn't say niche, it's a pretty big part.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it'll always be, who knows, 100 years from now, maybe Columbus keeps growing, and they get an NBA team, and they get a Major League Baseball team, or they get an NFL team as this city becomes more and more attractive and impressive, and it's growing up unbelievably. It really is almost as old as the team itself in some ways. Like, I first started coming here in the 80s when I would come down from Heidelberg, go to High Street, and then after high school and college, Columbus was really the only part of the state doing well in the 80s. And so every friend of mine who was a grad in high school or college, they all came to Columbus then, because that was so as a result, everybody's here now, which is great when I come here because I can visit them all. But back then, I have a buddy who lives out near Polaris. That was just a bunch of grass. There was nothing there. So again, Columbus really started to grow up about the time the Blue Jackets came. And so now here it is continually to grow. But it will always be the first team. It will always be their organic baby. If a team moved, like Las Vegas, they got the Raiders moving, they got the A's moving, but to them, the Golden Knights is their baby. That's the old Las Vegas residents team. So just like the old Columbus residents here, as people come to the city, there'll be people here, obviously, whose grandfathers were here and great-grandfathers. To them, the Blue Jackets will always be a part of their heritage and their family, their grandfathers and their dads. That's why it's irreplaceable to them. And you're right, despite really, at times, not good sustained success, and still looking for that first cup, it's always been a very healthy franchise because of the loyalty and passion of the sport fan base you talked about.
Have you had any specific favorite Blue Jackets players over the last 25 years?
I look back at that first team because I was here that night, game 1. I think I was doing something for ESPN because I remember wearing a suit and I was in the press box, but I don't remember doing anything except.
You sure you didn't just put a suit on and sneak in that night?
I don't think I would have done that. That's but Michael Ayres, who was the beat writer for the Dispatch at the time, he let me pick the 3 stars. Like, that was like such a big honor to me because growing up, you'd wait on the radio. I listened to a lot of games on the radio because there wasn't a lot of hockey on TV when I was a kid, and so you'd wait for the 3 stars at the end of the game. That was kind of a big deal, even though you realize now it's just some newspaper guy, drinking bourbon, picking 3 stars. Here, I got to go write the story. But as a kid, it had a wonder to it. So I remember picking the 3 stars: Tony Amonte, Bruce Gardner, and Rito von Arx, some dude from Switzerland who only scored 3 NHL goals, only played about 50 games that one year, went back to Switzerland. But that night, he had 2 goals, and he was Bucci's 3rd star. And Kevin Dineen was on that team. Like guys like that, guys who are kind of my age, who were trying to extend their careers or find something, part of this enthusiasm. Players love to play on expansion teams because there's so much enthusiasm and innocence to it, right? And so those kinds of guys were certainly, and then Rick Nash is the ultimate rock star, really borderline Hall of Fame. People don't realize how good he was. Had he played in this era, or even the 80s and 90s, he would have scored 70 goals a year, like literally 70. He would have scored 600 goals. He played in a bad time to score goals. His Richard 19-year-old season when he won the Rocket Richard, it's one of the best seasons in the history of the league. To do that at 19, and when no one scored goals that year, that was right before the lockout, right? Unbelievable. Rick Nash is an absolutely rock star. I actually think he's underrated in the NHL landscape and even probably the Columbus athletic landscape. Few better athletes in the history of Columbus than him. He's like, well, Mount Rushmore, obviously. Maybe 1, but certainly top 3.
Well, I'm glad that you went through that whole thing because Rick Nash is the easy one for everybody, right? So I'm glad you started at the very beginning.
Right.
You got some other guys in there. When you look at this Blue Jackets team as we get ready for this draft, this team is finally back in the position where it's looking to add players that can play right now. I mean, these draft picks, whether they're taken, whether they're traded, whatever, doesn't matter. You're not looking 3 and 4 years down the road right now. You're looking at this coming season.
Right, yeah, 2 number 1 draft picks, always good. It's always good to have organizational depth, but you're right. Anybody they take now, because they're a good team, again, anybody they take now probably won't show up to 3 to 4 years. But 3 to 4 years, as we know, time goes fast. And if they find a right-handed shot defenseman or a young defenseman who at 22 comes up and is suddenly a top 4 guy that you can pay minimum wage in the salary cap era, that's important to always do that, to always have those guys to supplement who are actually can contribute. Like that's Edmonton's problem right now. They don't have any of those young players that can bring up, play for minimum wage, and be a big contributor. So that'll be the step. Don Waddell, though, the team is in a position for 10 years to be a success. I'm an Adam Fantilli stan of all time. Like, he is the dude, and you win around guys like that. And what Johnny Gaudreau did, choosing Columbus, I think changed the image of this franchise forever. I think you cannot, the reverberations of that are going to be felt for years. And who knows, maybe we'll see another big free agent sign this summer. And I think Johnny helped lay that groundwork for picking Columbus. That was an amazing moment in franchise history when he did that. It came out of nowhere, and no one saw it coming. They all thought the big East Coast teams were going to get him, but no, this is where he, and only in the meantime, how his wife has responded to the area. They know what a great place it is to raise a family. And as players enter their prime, they start having kids a little bit later now, like all young kids do. They tend to have babies and kids a little bit later, just as they enter their prime. And where do I want to raise their kids? They want to raise them in a place like Columbus. So I really believe what Gaudreau did is going to have a huge impact for this franchise going forward.
The first ripple was Sean Monahan coming here,
Absolutely.
To be honest. And Sean was such a huge part of what this team did in the turnaround last season.
Right, exactly. And just an amazing player. And you're right, Johnny's wingman. But Gaudreau was a rock star, man. He was, and funny, all the USA hockey stuff that we see kind of after the fact, because people don't really pay attention to USA hockey stuff outside of the Olympics. And the fact that they dedicated that to Johnny, Zach went into the room and brought Johnny's 13 out when they won the gold medal this year at the World Championships. That was really cool. So yeah, just there's so much good feeling around Columbus, great momentum, and you hope now it can continue with the draft, see what Don Waddell does. Talk about a guy with experience. He's done everything in the game, going back to the IHL. He was a defenseman for Northern Michigan. He played the game, started the Thrashers, of course, was part of the Red Wings success early on. This is the guy you want at the helm right now. And I'm sure he's juiced like he's a young guy again. He probably has that enthusiasm of a guy in his 20s and 30s as he takes on this role.
How do you see this draft? Because this is an unusual one. There's not a Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid kind of a guy. And from all reports, everything you read, everything you watch, everything you listen to, it seems like, well, there's a couple of guys that could be really good. And then there's just a lot of good guys that could slot in almost anywhere. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's going to be guys, and that's why drafts are fun. I like looking back at drafts, 5, 6-year-old drafts or 10-year-old drafts, or even 4-year-old drafts. And if you drafted again, where would this guy go? And there's always movement, So even though you think, oh, we have the 11th pick, or we have the 17th pick, or wherever we are, those guys are David Pastrnak went in the 20s, Patrice Bergeron was a second-round pick. Brad Marchand was a third-round pick. I'm surprised GMs, and this is maybe what Don Waddell keeps those picks, he can identify there's a couple guys who are like the most intense player, play like Matthew Tkachuk. Maybe not skill-wise, they're rated lower, but that's a player that Don Waddell can take now. He doesn't have to take the flashiest little skill guy. He's got plenty of skill. Take a guy who you can see, boy, when he's 21 and he's pretty physically in a good position now, he could really help us in that bottom six and maybe creep up in the top six. So getting guys like a Matthew Tkachuk who can't really skate very well, but look at his value, right? And Brad Marchand, 37 years old, playoff beast. That's who you win with. So Don can identify guys who win in the playoffs. He has a guy, because you have to make the playoffs as a GM, right? You've got a GM for the regular season to win games, sell tickets, and then get to the playoffs. But when you get there, there's a certain type of player you need to win. And maybe he can take a few of those guys in the first round.
I was just thinking, I'll bet you scouts love drafts like these.
I agree. Less pressure, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and when you have those top guys, and if you have 7 of them, everybody's going after those guys, right? Maybe let's try to trade up, or you know what's going to happen. I mean, here is where you can really separate from, how good is my scouting staff as compared to somebody else's, right?
I love that nuance, right? There's like nuance, and that's what a scout, the best scouts can look at a guy and say, boy, if his stick was an inch longer, he'd be a better player. Or you know what? If he sharpens his skates this way, if his hollow is different, he can. Like there's some scouts who are that good. But you're right. Draft rankings, top 7. All right, when in doubt, just take that 4th-rated guy. We pick 4th. Take the pressure off. But I really think this kid is going to be like a Sam Bennett down the road or a Matthew Tkachuk, even though he's rated 12th, right? But that's happened before. Alexander Barkov, no one had him going second to Florida. Dale Talon was the GM at the time, a guy who I think was a nuanced GM. No, we're taking that big giant Finn guy whose dad was a Russian who played pro hockey. I think that's long term. That's the play. Obviously, it was the right play. And even when Dubois was taken here, and that was at the time, and it looked like it was going to be a great draft. He didn't take care of his own career going forward. But sometimes you take the different guy, and it's the right move. It's not always the draft list is not always the way to go.
Well, Bucci, thanks for taking some time for me.
You bet, brother.
Great to have you back in Columbus, and we'll see you here with ESPN.
Amen.